And again, welcome everyone. This is the third and last in the series. At the end of tonight's session, I'll tell you what I have in mind for the MOSh pit as we're going forward. I can tell you it's not going to be every Wednesday night like it was last year. Well, I'll tell you right now. But rather, I have some ideas for extended learning, over a number of sessions like this was for Teshuvah. Maybe looking at prayer, maybe looking at philosophy and theology. And so I'll announce that by email. And each week we'll be on this for a short period of time, a matter of a month, let's say, we'll be on that topic. Okay, and then we'll take a break again and we'll go from there. So just watch your email. So this evening is, I'm dedicating to Reb Zalman of blessed memory. And I am going to lean on Reb Zalman so much that I'm actually going to be reading from a book of his and unpacking it as I go. The book is called A Guide for Starting Your Own Incarnation. Reb Zalman wrote this book in response to a request from the folks at BJ, B'nai Yeshurun, in Manhattan, to write something on the topic of Teshuvah. And there's a lot of sources in here. The material is this evening is, please stop me if there's any time you get confused, because it's not light stuff, but it is really deep stuff. Before I got on, I was talking to Renee, my wife Renee. She's going to be leading services in Louisville for families, both young families and older families. And she came downstairs before, and she told me that she was having a dilemma. And the dilemma was this: how do you explain the book of life? How do you explain God to and the idea that God writes in and keeps track of in a book of life our deeds? It's hard enough for us to wrap our heads around it, and how we come to understand it is really only after wrestling with ideas of Jewish theology, and of course wrestling with what the divine even is to us. Reb Zalman, as I've mentioned many times, talked a lot about getting over what he called a pediatric understanding of God. As God is the man in the heavens and the clouds with the white beard and watching our every move and writing in a book, right? But if God's not that, then what is God? So that was, I'm going to call that Renee's dilemma. Okay. So I want to bring up a line that is at the very end of the book of Eicha that we read on Tisha B'Av. That this line, this line, because it's in every Shabbat Torah service. And we're going to also be singing it on Yom Kippur, and I'll share the screen with you. Hashivenu Adonai elecha v'nashuva, chadesh yameinu kekadem. There was a beautiful round for this, which I know many of you probably know. So let's sing it. Hashivenu, Hashivenu, Adonai elecha, Hashivenu, Hashivenu, Adonai elecha, v'nashuva, v'nashuva, chadesh, chadesh, yameinu kekadem. Hashivenu Adonai Elecha v'nashuva. Speaking to God or saying about God, Hashivenu, God, for Yud He Vav He, to cause us to return to you, meaning God. And what will be the what will be the result of that? Or what also are we asking the divine for? Chadesh Yameinu, renew our days, kekedem, which is often translated as in days of old. You know, it's like in anything goes. In olden days of milk and honey, anything goes. Thank you, Jay. But what exactly does that mean? Renew us as in days of old, kekedem. So this is where, in my taking off point and using Reb Zalman's teaching, I want to stop the share here. Wait a second. How do I? Where'd it go? Renee's on the call.
Yeah.
Hi, Renee.
Hi.
There it is. Oh, no, I want to get rid of that. Okay. Stop share. All right. Can you see me now?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm back. All right, here we go. Again, stop me at any time because this is not light stuff. Reb Zalman writes, and this is based upon Hasidic thought, it is known that in the reality currently in place, as opposed to another reality, there are three dimensions labeled by Sefer Yetzirah. So Sefer Yetzirah is a Kabbalistic writing. Those three dimensions are space. So look around, you know, we live in a space, the container, that which is our reality on earth. And that is the meaning of olam, right? Melech ha'olam, which we'll hear plenty of during high holidays. The second dimension is the dimension of time, shana, as in shana tova, right? Now, shana means year. Right? So shana is a dimension of time, just like shavua is a dimension of time, or rega, a moment. And the third dimension, or what I'm going to now start calling coordinates, is nefesh. Welcome, Haf.
Thank you.
And nefesh is us, a person, right? A person is nefesh. So the three coordinates, as they intersect with each other, as we live our lives, that's us. We are nefesh, living in dimensions of time and space. All righty? And it might sound a little Rod Serling in Twilight Zone. That's because it's the truth. All right. The Sfirot, which you're familiar with at least, the Sfirot being a map of reality according to the way that the Kabbalists sensed the Godhead and how the divinity revealed itself, how something came from nothing and what that something includes, and how it revealed itself and poured into existence, okay? If you look at the Sfirot, most of the time it looks like a tree, right? Or when you say Eitz Chaim, that is one thing that we're referring to, is that we are made up of all of these energies that are the Sfirot, okay? Quoting Reb Yosef Yitzhak Schneerson, who is of Lubavitch, right, one of the Lubavitcher Rebbe's, he said at a Hasidic gathering, and now I'm quoting Reb Zalman, that he heard from his own spiritual guide. Kabbalah comes along and makes God human. Now I'm going to put quotation marks over human, but makes God something that we can interact with, because the Sfirot gives us some idea of what it means to be made in the image of God. All right? The Kabbalah comes and makes God human, And Hasidic thought makes a human divine. So when we start wrestling with these kinds of mystical ideas, we meet God in that place where Nefesh and Olam and Shana all intersect. Because God is too in that space and beyond that space. Any questions before I go on? All right. I'm hoping it'll make real good sense when I'm finished. This means that Kabbalah makes the divine more accessible to our own understanding, so that we can see our humanity in the lower realities from the vantage point of the higher perspective. So it's as if we're looking at ourselves from the GPS, I call it, God positioning system. Right? We can see where we are, right, in our lives, in our journey, how much schmutz we've carried with us in our karma, right? And that is, for me, is the meaning of sin. That sin, meaning that we miss the mark, we're living up to our potential, right? And the mistakes that we all make, they kind of cover, like the moon, like covering a cloud, right? You can't see behind the cloud behind the moon. We kind of like cloud out divine light from our own neshamot, from our own souls, from our own being, when we quote unquote sin, when we, as often referred to, we miss the mark. So Chassidus comes to show a person how to reveal the divinity which is within the human soul. That humanity is truly in the model of that which is above. Now, of course, we have to use the metaphors of above and below. But if you look back at this, here's the share. As the circular nature, that this is the way that Kabbalistically things works in circles. That everything reacts and intersects and interacts with each other, and there is no beginning and there is no end. Or in Hasidus it says the end is the beginning and the beginning is the end. It's almost like a dog chasing its tail really fast. All right, so now, Hashivenu. Hashivenu Adonai Elecha v'nashuva, chadesh yameinu kekadem. Return us. Remember what kekadem means, how we understand kekadem? Anybody? Renew us as in days of?
Old, but from before.
Judy, great.
Kekadem is from before.
Yeah, but
I think it alludes to the Gan Eden. Together.
Okay.
Like in the Shiva Brachot, when it's also referred to as Kekadem.
Okay, so in Gan Eden, as you're referring to,
as before.
That was, if we think about before there was a before, right? Or the Edenistic, before we were, cast out of Eden, like James Dean, right? When we head east of Eden. All right. That's what Reb Zalman is going to get to. Kekadem is usually understood as meaning as it was before. So, but what does that mean, as it was before? So now we're moving from meaning as in days of old. So now we've moved on to as in days before. But if we go back to before there was a before, there is no day. There's no sense of Shana, right? There's no sense of time. There's no sense of space. This is before creation actually happens. This is before God even dreams of bringing us into being. Remember last week, for those of you who were here, I read a little from Mr. G, right? And the first page is all about God wakes up from a long slumber and decides to create a world. And then the book is about how the divine goes about that. So, picking up on what you were saying, Judy, there are other forms of this word which convey a different sense of before. lahakdim, which hakdama is that which happens before a book starts. So before you get to the book, the hakdama is kind of like the forward. So what is the forward to existence? Okay, that is the question. And here's the answer. If I can find where I wanted to pick up. Okay, I have to stop here. Most of you were here last week, but I'll do a little chazara, a little repetition. Remember that Rambam talked about Shuba Gamora, complete teshuva, and then he gave the example, remember, of the man who goes back to that same situation with the woman who he had had an affair with, and this time he doesn't have sex with her, right? He stops himself. So what he is saying here is that in order to teshuva completely, you have to have the same exact situation that you faced before. Okay, I overeat. There's those chips that I eat way too many of. Am I going to stop myself after a few? Or am I going to keep eating like I did last time and I got a stomachache? So it might seem like a trite example, but it's what we can all relate to, all right, with eating for sure. But there are other kinds of examples that we can all think of just those, it's like Yogi Berra said, it's deja vu all over again. Just doing the same thing like over, because it's habit, right? Just like that poem, a biography in 5 chapters that I read on the first session. I do it, there's that hole, I fall in, it's my fault. Okay, so what is the option to going back and not doing the same thing all over again, as in the example that the Rambam gives? Here's from the book. One way to understand the verse, take us back, O God, to yourself, and let us come back, renew us as days of old, is to say that teshuvah is merely taking me back to the condition just before the sin. Rambam and most other classical commentators take it exactly that way, and that's what I was just repeating from last week that we studied. They say that if in order to do teshuvah, for it to really happen, it must be, quote unquote, with the same woman in the same place. Right, Jay, Groundhog Day. Exactly. Only if you withstand the temptation in the same situation again, Reb Zalman calls it a kind of like a lesser kind of teshuvah. It's a repentance in deed or in fact, but it's not it's not really Shuba Gamora. It's limited because he says it's only making a loop from the inner remorse to the moment prior to the avera, prior to the sin, right? So you're going back, right? If you can go back in time, if we had a time turner, right? Go back in time to right before we did what we did and change our action. That's great. But if I go, he says, kekedem, that's not what teshuvah is even about anymore. He's talking about a kekedem, like you were, Judy, before time, before space, before anything was written on the face of reality, before there was a before. Are you grokking this? That's where he wants us to go back. And here's what he says, and this is great. There's a difference between how it was before in history and kekedem, which is prior to the beginnings of history. It is the first moment of the right kind of motivation, which is Zen, they call beginner's mind. So for those of you who are familiar with meditation, beginner's mind takes us to that place of pure curiosity, saying, Miza, what is this? Right? That returns us to the childlike Sefer HaZichronot, which has nothing inscribed in it yet. Unless you feel that we are pulling karma from a past lifetime, that's a whole other different thing, right? But I suppose if I could ask Reb Zalman, he might say that yes, that's all fine and good, and we're looking to go beyond all of those past lifetimes, all the way back to kekדם, as it was before there was a before. So, any questions before I go on and start to wrap this up? Hoff, you got something to say, I see. You're muted.
I was about to use the word karma, and then you stole it from me.
Sorry.
But I'll ask it anyway, because isn't there an implication that it's not necessarily karma from lives before, but isn't there an implication what you're saying about karma from this very life itself?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's how I read Sefer HaZichronot, the book of life, right? We write the story of our lives, right? Is there a God writing it down? That's not my theology, but our actions have consequences, and they inscribe themselves in the same way as now we're discovering that trauma, right, plays across generations and that it's inherited. We pull all of this schmutz with us. It's our Sefer HaZichronot. It's our book of remembrance, right? And everything that we are now is part, again, Reb Zalman, of the operating system that we began with, how for me, 65 years ago, right? So absolutely, it can just be, you can work with it just from this lifetime. So the paragraph that's so difficult, who shall live and who shall die? Okay. And as Leonard Cohen, the Kohen says, and who shall I say is calling? Right? It's really tough paragraph. It's made tougher if we look at it as the consequence of our actions are going to either have, if we're good things will happen. If we're bad things will happen. No, that's a lie. We know that's not true. So we look at the paragraph and we say, yes, that is life. Some will live, some will die, some will be raised up, some will be humbled, some will be poor, some will be rich, some by fire, some by water. We're experiencing that, ecologically, right? Doesn't take a leap of imagination to see that all of these things are true. But here is the kicker. And this is a quote from a book that you should have on your bookshelf, which is Rabbi Alan Lew of blessed memory. This is happening and you are not, this is real and you are not prepared. It's about the holy days from Slichot, from Tisha B'Av through the end of Yom Kippur. Written in very accessible language. He's great. So here's a quote. Spiritual practice won't change what happens, right? So think at the end of, I'm now unpacking that a little bit. Spiritual practice won't change what happens. So remember, at the end of this paragraph of Rosh Hashanah Yikatevun, of Yom Tzom Kippur Yechateimun, on Rosh Hashanah it's written, on Yom Kippur it's sealed, right? And then you have all of the things that happen. Right after that paragraph it says, does anybody know? Uteshuva, utzedakah, utefila, ma'avirin et roa hagazera. Those three things. Tzedakah, right? Justice or giving of charity, tefillah, prayer, and teshuva, and return. They alleviate, they mitigate the severity of the decree. Remind me to go back to that, because I want to say something about that too. So, where was I? I lost my train of thought. I was talking about, Oh, right. So, what does that mean? Well, that's what it seems to say, but in a little bit of studying I did this week, it's not actually how Jewish theology looks at it in a mystical sense. It's that it can cancel the decree. It can cancel the decree, that in partnership with the divine, we can make change happen, even if karmically it was going to happen to us. Like the mystical stories of the Baal Shem Tov going up as the highest of the high of the heavens and rearranging all the letters up there to save somebody's life or to change something, right? That's the power that we have. And we can go there when we go kekדם. When we look at this with a lot less reading it, if you read it, the way it seems to read is like, oh my God, if this is what being Jewish is, I don't want to do this. I don't want to be a part of this. But if you read it, I was sorry, I caught myself. Thank you. It was Alan Lew. Nobody remembered me to tell me. So spiritual practice of Teshuvah, Tzedakah, Tefillah, he says won't change what happens, whatever your spiritual practice. Rather, it will help us to experience what happens not as evil, but simply what happens. That's beginner's mind. To watch and see what happens. Then he says, Alan Lew says, spiritual practice will help us to understand that everything that happens, even the decree of death, flows from God, flows from the divine. Not from a divine that is sitting in his chair with the white beard and writing in the book and saying, you're zapped, you're dead, you're alive, you're this, you're that. But a divinity which gave birth to the dream, which is us. A divinity which is unnamed. We have names for God. But a divinity that is, for all intents and purposes, the great mystery, through and from which energy flows, shefa. There's a flow of energy from that. And then to finalize it, it is like what's that called? When the rain turns into mid and it returns, it's like the water cycle, right? That's what's happening in Jacob's ladder. Remember, the angels are ascending and then descending. So our prayers ascend, right? Or our meditation ascends. Of course, this is the horizontal language. And they ascend first before they descend. So that's us. We're walking up and down the ladder. And so we are participants in this great dream, which on Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, when we get to that paragraph, who shall live and who shall die, if you sit in gentle and expanded equanimity and just hold out your hands and say, yes, that happens. And that I can make a difference in the future, in the present and the future, then perhaps we will have really, really entered into Yamim Noraim, the days of awe, with both intention and take something out of it in which to inspire us as we go forward. Any comments, questions before we say Shana Tova and wish each other a Laila Tov? I think I have absolutely stunned you all.
Mark, is the recording of this going to be on your website?
Yeah, I'll put it on. It's on the Reb Marco website, and I'll try to get it on within the next 24 hours.
There was a lot of information, and I think I have to listen to bits and pieces of it again.
Right. Absolutely.
I think we have to return to the beginning of tonight.
Yeah, right. You know, maybe the shortcut is, maybe the kitsur of the night's session is when we sing Hashivenu and we sing, you know, to ask for God to return us, for Yud Hey Vav Hey to return us as the days of old. Maybe it's to return us in that place that children, young children naturally are, that sense of curiosity and radical amazement that Reb Heschel talks about, where we see the world and we interact with it. And if we're so blessed, very little clings to us, all right?
I keep coming back to the last two sons at Passover, the one that's the simple son and the one too young to ask, what is all of this?
Yeah, right. Yeah, so that's exactly right. So that the simple son sometimes is looked at, you know, in meditation circles, that's the son we want to be like, right? It's not simple as a simpleton. It's simple because it's that simple. All righty. If you were so moved, I haven't done this up until now, to make a donation in someone's name or just because, go to the Minyan Oneg Shabbat website and help support this work and our community, more importantly. Wish you all a Shana Tova, sweet, happy, meaningful, healthy, sane, a year of plenitude, a year of less worry and less tsuris and just less, oh my God, it's less trouble, you know. May our mother planet be part of that healing as well. And may we all be blessed with family and friends who are there to support us and the opportunities to be there for them as well.
Amen.
Amen.
Hashivenu, Hashivenu, Adonai Elecha, Venashuva, Kadesh, Kadesh, Yameinu Kekadem. Thank you for being a blessing in my life, everyone. Good night.
Good night.
Good night.